Hey there, welcome back to the channel. You're probably here because there's someone you can't stop thinking about, someone who you're sure still feels something for you, but they've gone completely silent. You keep asking yourself, if they still miss me, why haven't they said anything? It doesn't make sense, right? You've seen the signs, the lingering views on your stories, the random like on an old post, the moments when your name comes up through mutual friends. It's like they're still circling your world, but refusing to land. And it's driving you crazy, because you know in your heart this isn't over, not emotionally, not energetically. You can still feel their presence in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. But every time you check your phone, nothing. No message, no call, no closure. Just this gnawing absence that doesn't go away. And it's not just painful, it's maddening. Because silence doesn't mean they've forgotten you. Often, it means they remember you too much. It means they're thinking about you, but something is stopping them. And that something, that's what we're going to unpack today. This isn't just about missing someone. This is about the psychology behind why people hold back, even when their heart is screaming to reach out. This is about fear, fear of awkwardness, fear of rejection, fear of reopening wounds they don't feel ready to face. It's about ego, that pride that whispers, "Don't make the first move." It's about unresolved guilt, the kind that makes them feel unworthy of reconnecting. And sometimes it's about their own internal chaos. They may be stuck in the past, lost in overthinking, or convinced you're better off without them. And meanwhile, you're left holding on to questions that never get answered. That kind of silence can feel like emotional torture, because it doesn't bring peace, just confusion. So in this video, we're going to explore why people stay quiet, even when they miss you like hell. And not just from a surface level, we're going deeper into the human mind, into the emotion, into the soul. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a silence that doesn't make sense, this is for you. Let's figure it out together. Number one, they're fighting their ego more than they're missing you. Here's the hard truth most people don't want to admit. Sometimes, the person who misses you the most is also the one least likely to reach out, not because they've stopped caring, but because their ego is louder than their longing. When someone is battling between their pride and their heart, pride often wins. They think about you. They remember what you meant to them. But then their mind replays the last argument, the last message left unread, the feeling of rejection, or the belief that you didn't fight for them. And suddenly, reaching out doesn't feel like a reunion. It feels like defeat. They start to rewrite the story in their head just to protect themselves. They convince themselves that they were the ones hurt more, that it's not their job to fix what's broken, that if you truly cared, you would have reached out by now. It becomes a game of emotional chess, and their ego is obsessed with not making the first move. Even if they miss you every day, even if they ache to talk to you again, they'll stay silent, just so they don't have to risk being seen as the one who cared more. They scroll through your photos, they check your online status, they hover over your name in their contact list, but they never hit send. Why? Because in their world, vulnerability equals weakness. They'd rather torture themselves in silence than risk a message that goes ignored. They'd rather wonder about you in secret than admit out loud that they still need you. And that's the real tragedy. Their ego isn't just blocking the message, it's blocking the healing. It's feeding them lies like, if I text first, I'll lose control, or if I stay quiet, they'll come to me. But the truth is, ego and connection can't exist in the same space. One has to give. And when the fear of losing face becomes more powerful than the desire to reconnect, love gets buried under a wall of pride. You might think they've moved on, but really, they're stuck. Stuck behind their own emotional armor, afraid to lower it even an inch. That silence you keep hearing, it's not peace. It's ego holding their tongue while their heart quietly bleeds. Comment this if you've ever been the one caught between wanting to text and refusing to lose pride. Missing someone doesn't mean you're ready to be vulnerable again, because sometimes the war inside them is stronger than the love they still feel, and they're too afraid to lose both. Number 2, they're haunted by guilt and don't know how to face you. Sometimes the silence isn't about ego, rejection, or moving on. It's about guilt so heavy they don't know how to carry it in front of you. They don't text you because they're haunted by what they did. And they're terrified to see the reflection of their actions in your eyes. Maybe they crossed a line that shattered your trust. They lied, betrayed you, neglected your emotional needs, or walked away when you needed them most. And now they live with that memory. It lingers, not just in their mind, but in their body. The moment they think of texting you, a wall of shame rises up. They miss you, yes. They replay your laugh, your kindness, the way you were always there. But then that memory is followed by another, the one where you cried because of them, where your voice cracked from exhaustion, where they saw the disappointment on your face. That image is what stops them. Because reaching out isn't just sending a message, it's stepping back into the space where they caused harm. And not everyone has the emotional strength or maturity to do that. Some people would rather vanish than admit they were wrong. It's easier to pretend it never happened than to own up to the fact that they broke something beautiful. They scroll through your old photos. They remember how good it felt to be close to you, and still, they don't say a word. Not because they don't care, but because caring hurts more when you know you were the one who caused the pain. Guilt has a way of silencing people who never learned how to apologize, how to sit with discomfort, or how to face the consequences of their own behavior. They keep telling themselves it's better to stay quiet than risk hearing you say you don't forgive them, because that would make the guilt real, undeniable, final. So instead, they linger in the shadows of your life, watching but not speaking, feeling but not acting. You might think they've become heartless, that they've moved on without regret. But the truth is, they carry that guilt like a ghost, following them into every relationship, every quiet moment, every time they look in the mirror and wonder why they let you go. This doesn't excuse what they did. It just reveals the emotional paralysis they're stuck in. Comment this if it struck a chord. If they were truly sorry, they'd say something. And maybe, just maybe, the silence means they're still too ashamed to even try. Number 3, they've convinced themselves you don't care anymore. Sometimes the silence isn't pride, guilt, or fear. It's a story they've told themselves so many times that they've come to believe it's true. They don't text you because they've convinced themselves you don't want them to. Maybe you were the one who walked away. Maybe you asked for space. Maybe your strength in moving forward made it look like you were over them. And now, every day they stay silent is another day they tell themselves you've forgotten, that you've closed that chapter, that the door is locked and they're not welcome anymore. They replay the last words you said, the look in your eyes, the way you didn't reach out either, and their mind fills in the blanks with the worst-case scenario. Even if they miss you deeply, even if every part of them aches to hear your voice, they don't want to risk disturbing the peace they think you found. They're scared of being an unwanted memory in your inbox, scared their name will bring up pain or annoyance instead of warmth. So they convince themselves that staying silent is respectful, even though it breaks them a little more each day. They think you've healed, that you've moved on, maybe even with someone better, that your silence is strength, when really it might just be protection. They see your posts, your updates, your smiles, and they assume those are signs that you're fine without them. They don't realize you've learned to carry pain with grace, that you're not over them, just tired of reaching out to someone who no longer responds. And if your last interaction was filled with anger, heartbreak, or closure, they take those final words as gospel. "Don't ever contact me again" becomes a life sentence in their head. They respect the boundary, but they also ache behind it. What makes it even more tragic is that both of you could still care. Both of you could still lie awake thinking about each other. But no one wants to make the first move. No one wants to be the one who misread the situation. So the silence continues. Not because the love is gone, but because the fear of misjudging the other person's heart is louder than the desire to reach out. Comment this if you've ever been caught in that waiting game. Two people in love, both waiting, both afraid. Because sometimes the message never comes, not out of cruelty, but because both people believe the other stopped caring first. Number 4, they're stuck in the what-ifs, paralyzed by overthinking. Sometimes the silence isn't intentional. It's the product of a storm happening entirely in their mind. They don't text you, not because they've moved on or don't feel anything, but because they've fallen into the trap of endless what-ifs. What if you ignore them? What if you've changed? What if the message opens a door they're not ready to walk through? One tiny impulse to say, "Hey, I miss you," becomes a maze of mental traps. They play out every possible reaction, every word you might say, every awkward silence that could follow. Their brain turns a single text into 100 imagined conversations, and none of them end well. They overanalyze your last exchange, dissect your tone, replay moments from the past, and convince themselves they'll just mess it all up if they try. The fear of saying the wrong thing or being met with indifference becomes paralyzing. They don't want to look desperate, clingy, or foolish, so they convince themselves it's safer to stay quiet, even when their heart is screaming to reconnect. They might even go as far as drafting the message. "Hi, I've been thinking about you." Their thumb hovers over send, but then they hesitate. They imagine you seeing the text, rolling your eyes, showing it to a friend, or leaving it on read. And suddenly, the message feels like a mistake. They erase it, close the app, pretend they didn't almost reach out. It's not because they don't care. It's because they care so much that the thought of rejection, even a small one, feels unbearable. They'd rather sit in uncertainty than risk clarity that hurts. The unknown becomes their comfort zone because even though it's painful, at least it doesn't confirm their worst fear, that the connection is gone forever. So they live in limbo, thinking about you, wishing things were different, wanting to reconnect, but too afraid to make the first move and be met with coldness or silence. They romanticize the idea of reaching out, but can't bring themselves to do it unless they're sure the outcome will be safe. And in love, nothing is ever certain. They choose inaction, not because they've stopped feeling, but because the risk of misreading your heart feels too high. Comment this if you've ever been stuck in overthinking. I was scared to lose what little was left. Because sometimes silence isn't a lack of care. It's the result of loving someone so much, you become terrified of losing the little hope you're still holding on to. Number 5. The distance became too big to cross. Time has a strange way of making things feel further than they are. The longer someone waits to send a message, the heavier that silence becomes. What could have been a casual check-in after a few days starts to feel like an impossible mission months later. They think about you often, maybe even daily. They wonder how you're doing, if you still think about them, if you've healed or moved on. But as each week passes without a message, they start to believe the gap is unbridgeable. It's no longer just about saying hi. It's now about justifying why they didn't say it earlier. Their mind floods with excuses rooted in fear. It's been too long, it'll be weird. They probably hate me for staying silent. I missed my chance. They're over it. So instead of reaching out, they stay in the shadows, quietly watching your life unfold. They see your updates, your smiles, your milestones. And rather than seeing an invitation, they see a reminder that too much time has passed. They talk themselves out of reconnecting again and again, each time convincing themselves they're doing the right thing by leaving you alone. But deep down, they're not at peace. They're stuck. Because the feeling never really went away. Time didn't heal it. It just buried it beneath layers of self-doubt, regret, and emotional hesitation. They haven't forgotten you. They've just become convinced that they're no longer allowed to care. The silence feels permanent now, not because it has to be, but because it's been left unchecked for so long that breaking it feels unnatural. They'd rather stay with the sadness they know than risk the unknown of a message that might not be welcomed. From a Stoic perspective, this is one of the most dangerous forms of inaction. Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." In this context, they fear embarrassment, vulnerability, and the possibility of rejection more than they fear the pain of staying silent. So the silence continues, not because the love died, but because fear dressed itself up as logic and whispered, "It's too late." But the truth is, time only wins if you let it. It can't kill emotion. It can't erase meaning, but it can weaken the courage to act if you let the days stack up without ever reaching forward. Drop this in the comments if you've felt this before. Time doesn't kill love. Fear does. Because more relationships end from hesitation than from heartbreak. Number 6. They're still healing, and they can't face you yet. There are times when silence isn't rejection, ego, or fear. It's a sign that someone is still stitching themselves back together. They miss you, yes, but they're not strong enough yet to see you, hear from you, or feel your presence without falling apart again. They're in the middle of becoming someone new, someone different, someone they can live with after everything that's happened. Because when a deep connection breaks, it doesn't just leave behind pain, it leaves behind a vacuum where identity once lived. The version of them that existed when you were in their life no longer fits, and they're still figuring out who they are without you in the picture. They're rebuilding piece by piece, and that's not something easily done under the weight of old feelings, complicated memories, or the temptation to slip back into familiar patterns. Reaching out, as harmless as it might seem to you, could feel like emotional time travel to them, pulling them right back into a place they've been trying desperately to leave behind. And it's not because they don't care. It's because caring too soon could reopen wounds that are just beginning to scar over. They might scroll through your pictures, reread your conversations, wonder how you're doing, and still decide not to send a single word. Not because they're cold, but because they're fragile. Healing doesn't always happen in connection. Sometimes people need distance. They need to retreat inward, into quiet, into solitude, so they can truly hear themselves again after the noise of a breakup or emotional collapse. Your presence, no matter how supportive, could stir up emotions they're not equipped to manage yet. Even if you still love them, even if you mean well. The truth is, they're not ignoring you. They're preserving themselves. They're choosing not to shatter the delicate progress they've made in silence. That's a strength too, even if it looks like avoidance from the outside. As Epictetus wisely said, "No man is free who's not master of himself." And maybe their silence is their way of regaining that mastery, learning to breathe again without depending on the air of your presence. Sometimes the most loving thing a person can do is stay away until they're whole enough to return as someone better, someone healed, someone who won't bleed on you from the wounds they're still nursing. So if they're not texting and you know they're still hurting, trust that they're doing the best they can, even if that means keeping their distance. If they still miss you but don't text you, it's not because the feelings vanished. It's not because you weren't important. It's not because they stopped remembering the way your voice softened when you laughed, or how safe it once felt to be around you. Their silence is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their inner world, their unresolved emotions, their fear of facing what broke, and what still lingers in the spaces they won't talk about. Emotion isn't black and white. It's messy, raw, and sometimes too overwhelming for people to express properly. Some people care but don't know how to say it. Some regret their choices but are too ashamed to admit it. Some miss you but are terrified that you won't respond the way they hope, and so they stay quiet. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's chaos wrapped in pride. Sometimes it's pain hiding behind a screen. Sometimes it's a person pretending not to care because it's easier than being vulnerable again. And yet, despite all this, you need to know that their inability to reach out has nothing to do with your worth. You are not unlovable because someone else couldn't show up. You are not too intense for someone who chose to stay small. You are not hard to love. You just love deeply in a world that often stays shallow. So if they're missing you in silence, let them. Let them wrestle with the words they never said. Let them carry the weight of their unspoken feelings. Let them wonder about you in the middle of the night and realize they had the chance and didn't take it. Your job is not to sit in waiting. Your job is to rise, to reclaim your peace, to give yourself the love they didn't have the courage to give you. You don't need a text to feel complete. You don't need a reply to feel validated. You don't need closure to heal. Healing isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you give yourself in silence, in grace, in choosing not to reopen the door they were afraid to knock on. Comment this below if you're ready to move forward. I release the need for closure. I choose peace over confusion. If this message stirred something in your heart, let me know. I see you. I feel what you're going through. You're not walking this alone. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay grounded, stay unshaken, and never forget this truth. You were never the silence. You were always the one they weren't strong enough to reach for.